It's wonderful to have all of you join us today. Really appreciate the opportunity to be able to focus on a variety of facets of the diamond of how work has changed in the pandemic era, and to drill down on a couple of examples, I think, to be able to illustrate how P&G, with the help and collaboration of EY, has been able to deal with some of the great challenges, especially in the supply chain. Now, I'm not a P&G alum, but I'm honored to be invited to spend some time with all of you. I've been trying to picture the thousands of people in the what I think of as the P&G diaspora. I think it's just marvelous that you've retained the connective tissue between you, because I think we're going to talk a lot about some of the future value of work being in human skills, but also in the networks, in the connections that we develop and that we maintain. Now, in this session, you're going to be hearing directly from business leaders from EY and P&G as part of this presentation. But I'm especially happy that our theme is about the idea of our best selves, is that we have this opportunity to be able to think about how we deal with these completely unique times. I know we like to think every time is unique, and then along comes a virus. Very few people living have lived through a global pandemic before. So I think when I talk to groups like this around the world, it's important to acknowledge just how challenging our current times are, but how many opportunities there are to be able to come up with new ways, as the prior speakers were talking about, to use our creativity, to use what makes us uniquely human, to be able to deal with some of these big shifts in our world. So I'd love to invite, I've got two amazing speakers joining me today, and I'd like to ask them to introduce themselves. And Ferris, I'm going to ask you to start off.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. I'm very pleased to be with you today and with the audience. Quickly, my name is Faris Sayegh. I manage the supply chain for our European region for Procter & Gamble. At the same time, I have the global supply network operation, everything to do with planning our supply chain and the global manufacturing capability. I have been with P&G for the past 33 years, an amazing journey that took me in almost, every part of the 5 regions we operate in. And I'm currently located in Geneva.
Wonderful. And Lisa, if you would just mind hopping in.
Sure. Thanks, Gary. And I'm so happy to be here with you and Ferris. I think we're going to have a great conversation today. My name is Lisa Caldwell, and I am the America's Business Consulting Leader for EY. I've worked in the manufacturing industry for 35 years, both in industry and as a consultant. I am a regular contributor to Forbes on manufacturing trends, and I'm also on the board of advisors of the Manufacturing Institute. And I think that one of the things I'm most proud of in my role at EY is the relationship and the alliance that we have with P&G. And I think you'll hear more about that and some of the commonalities between our companies, but also some of the great work that we've done in the manufacturing industry together. So looking forward to the discussion today.
Wonderful. No, that's going to be a great conversation. So, and just to give the folks who are watching a little bit of background, I'm based in San Francisco. I'm the author of a brand new book called The Next Rules of Work. And I serve as Nikki said, the chair for the future of work with Singularity University, the global learning platform. And I tend to like to focus on a variety of the systemic changes that are going on in work, in learning, and the organization. And as a matter of fact, one of the things that I think gives us a little framing, maybe helps you to have a mindset for thinking about this period that we're all going through. Back in April of 2020, remember how long ago that was? Doesn't that seem like just eons ago? In April of 2020, when we were all starting to just realize just what we were going through, I wrote an article on techonomy.com called The Great Reset. And what I want to offer this as maybe a way to think about sort of the phases that all of us are going through and how that might help us to be able to deal with what is often characterized as a continuing frame of uncertainty. So if you think about, if you look back, as my group did, my company, I've got a small but mighty consulting company called Charette that focuses on what we call initiatives with impact. And we've looked at a range of the previous resets that we've gone through, like the Great Recession. And what we realized is that they actually have three distinct phases. There's this initial falling off the cliff phase, where we're all just trying to survive. We don't know what's going on, 100% uncertainty. Then there's this sort of riffling along the bottom phase. It's like a fever chart where sort of, rather than the lights turning on and off, it's kind of like a rheostat where, oh, wait a minute, in this case, we've got infection rates in a particular area and we've got a lockdown. And, oh, in other areas we don't. Oh, and then it all changes. And so it's this constantly shifting landscape. And then what we can hope for is that in previous resets, there's always been this sort of recovery phase. There's been opportunity to be able to thrive. And that's really where I think, depending upon our experiences, each of us have gone through at least these first two phases. And in some parts of the world, they've gone through, they're already in the third phase. They already feel like they've got their arms around the virus. They've already been able to get back to some level of the new abnormal of business. But for many of us, it's actually, we're still in the second phase. And we still find ourselves continually trying to figure out how to get our arms around some of the challenges that we're experiencing. And so I wrote an update to this article earlier this year, and I just called it, the title was Same Storm, Different Boats. That's a Nordic phrase for how we all can have the same experience, but we can have very, very different results in what those experiences and how we actually are able to get our arms around the challenges that we're dealing with. So hopefully this can help you to think about in your sort of Venn diagram of where you are geographically, the industry that you're in, the teams that you work with, the projects that you're working on, your own individual work role, how these are constantly changing. And this is sort of the new abnormal. Well, what really happened for many is that in different industries, there was huge disruption. But in supply chains especially, I think we're all realizing in the headlines today just how much adaptation many people have had to do. And so if you look at the supply chain as essentially a bunch of atoms, things you can touch, moving through the world, and suddenly a boat blocks the Suez Canal. Or you've got to get some types of products or containers from China to Long Beach, and it's just a bridge too far. Like there's not enough, not all the pieces are coming together to get it there. You've got to come up with alternative routes, or you think of like going from New York to Finland, or you have to continually have this flexible way of dealing with that second phase of this constant up and down of availability and lockdown. So Ferris, I know that when I talked about the Great Reset, obviously I said these sort of three phases of survive, and then there's this revive thing, and then hopefully thrive. What did that look like for P&G when the pandemic first hit?
Gary, March 7, I landed from Canada. I was on my last business trip before the pandemic really hit us globally, and more so in Europe. That was on Saturday, the weekend. Sunday, I look at my email, and there is an email from our HR saying, where we're going to be shutting down the office. Switzerland, where I live, just said, listen, they recommend, at the beginning, they did not force it for people to work from home. So somehow it was like surreal. What are we talking about? The next thing on Monday, we were all connected at a global and regional level. And our primary focus was how can we protect our men and women more so on the front line. The office folks, like many of us who works in headquarters or in offices, we told them to stay at home. So we all went home, we were connected virtually, but number one, concern was, how are we going to provide hand and surface sanitizer, something we never thought about, masks to protect our people. So that was the number one priority. And it's amazing, in a crisis, nobody, will debate, nobody will challenge what was the objective. So we all went into work to see how we can make available 5 mask converters. We're not in a business of, manufacturing converters, manufacturing masks. We're in the business of consumer product, detergent, hair care, and so on. So the next thing, and days and weeks after that, we had 5 converters located in several markets in Europe. Same thing in North America. We immediately air freighted lines, and that's how it started. And then, of course, we ensured that we're all connected, and we put ourselves to serve our colleague on the front line, because those were the people who will show up every day to work, no matter how high the incidence rates were, no matter the cities that they went in lockdown, because our industry was classified as essential industry. So our people were in the manufacturing facilities, in the distribution center to produce. And from there, I tell you, Gary, we've seen things we have not seen, 33 years in P&G. I was blown away with the quality of commitment, the delivery of result, all the things that we're working on. It came across like we have a live drill to see if all the system, all the capability, all the processes, all these organization development to come to life in one go. So, and of course, if you look at the company result today, I'm very, very proud, to say how our people, rose to the challenge and delivered the result they're delivering.
Well, if you look at the 3 phases that I was talking about, and you look at the graph, I mean, it's clear. I'm sure March and April were really, really horrible to try to just figure out all this, how to deal with all this uncertainty. But clearly, the recovery and the rebuilding to be able to put all the pieces of the puzzle back together went really rapidly. So, tremendous results. Now, you mentioned some of the adaptation from a work standpoint. I also want to dive into really what's happened to each of us in our jobs, and then talk about. So we're mostly talking about the problem domain, and then we can talk about the solution domain. So in the same way that obviously I had to deal with so many of these, this big shift, dramatic change in the supply chain itself, our jobs also went through pretty significant change. And so I think if we were to step back and look at just what the components of a job are, for those who are watching, I'd urge you to think about your own work role. These are the 6 W's. The what of our work, the where of our work, who we work with, when we do our work, how we do our work, and why. And I think when we talk about this great reset, we tend to focus a lot on the where. We all know that many of us started to work from home and do a lot of Zoom calls. But I argue pretty much all of these have changed in this era. At least the opportunity to rethink them has changed. And so Andrew was talking about the whole idea of heads down work, to have the best circumstances for when and where we do our work, and then sort of heads up. And that's who we're collaborating with and how we do that work. And so I think our opportunity is to be able to rethink how each of these went through a really significant change. And because the way we as humans adapt is, we tend to try to get our arms around a whole bunch of changes simultaneously. So work became far more distributed. We often call it remote, but let's call it distributed. The who we work with went from just the colleagues that we saw every day in the office to what I call a work net, a much more flexible fabric of humans that we're working with. The what of work became more and more a range of projects that we need to solve for, and that's going to continue going into the future. When we did our work, we became much more flexible about that. How we did our work I think we're going to delve into a lot of the tool set for what enables us to be able to do work, especially in the pandemic era. And then, as many of you have seen, I'm sure, headlines around the world about things like the Great Resignation and rethinking work. I think we're rethinking meaning and purpose in a lot of the ways that we do our work. So that's all, to some extent, the problem domain. Let's focus on the solution domain. And I wanted to pull Lisa and Ferris in to talk about how to approach the kinds of processes we can follow to be able to most effectively deal with this kind of exponential change. So I did talk a lot at Singularity University about exponential change, the sort of increasing pace and scale of change. I'm going to argue that there's three aspects of how we solve for the solution domain, the ways that we approach these kinds of exponential shifts. And that's mindset, skill set, and tool set. And the difference between these is if wave a magic wand and we're at the base of a mountain and you have all of the skill set for climbing a mountain, but none of the mindset for climbing a mountain, you don't climb the mountain. But if I wave the magic wand again, you have all the mindset to climb the mountain and none of the skill set. You just think you can solve that problem and you take one step, two step, and eventually you're at the top of the mountain. But if you're facing an ice wall, it's very difficult to climb the wall without having the right tool set, without having an ice pick and so on. And so this is a way to think about mindset, skill set, and tool set as helping us to be able to continually prepare for a world of exponential change. Now I point a lot to the work of Carol Dweck in her book, Mindset. And she talks about a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And I think a lot of what Ferris was talking about, and the previous two speakers especially were talking about, is just having more of a growth mindset, of seeing these as problems, as opportunities to be able to solve. So, Lisa, I just wanted to ask you, when you think of the mindset with which the challenges, especially of the pandemic, and looking at how the P&G approached dealing with this big shift, how do you think about the kind of mindset that was necessary to be able to help people to get their arms around the virus and then thrive?
So I think that from a mindset perspective, we really have to begin with the discussion of leadership. And we at EY have coined a term, transformative leadership. And it doesn't apply just to those of us in executive roles or positions, but it applies to every one of us and how we do our job every day and how we can be transformative leaders. And I think that maybe a little explanation of how that model works, because I think it ties in really well to some of the cultural similarities between EY and P&G. So if you think about the model, it actually starts, Gary, with your why, which is purpose. And the center of the model is all about your individual purpose. And so we ask, each of us has a purpose statement that we've really thought about and we've crafted to be able to get at what is meaningful to us in the work that we want to do. So from there, we then expand out into three different layers. The first one is called Better Me. And what Better Me is all about is curiosity and learning, encouraging people to be more agile in how they think and act, and focusing on the well-being of our people. And once Better Me is in place, then you can start to talk about Better Us, which is our better EY or EY and P&G teams. And what does Better Us look like? Well, we want to inspire each other. We want to create belonging. And we want to make sure that we're teaming in a way that we drive better outcomes and results. And then the third level, once we're teaming together, is about building a better working world. And what that means for EY is yes, building a better opportunity for each of our clients and the industries that they serve, but also the communities that we're a part of, and ultimately the society that we all share together. And so for us at EY, culture really leads our business model. And I think that's what we have in common with P&G. And I think that's one of the reasons that P&G did so well during the time of COVID and disruption, is that the model is about really engaging everyone and lifting all performances.
So you've just given the argument for why the theme of our better selves is so important, is to give the three different anchors about how to do that. So, but I just want to talk about some of the practical application of this. So, and I know P&G talks a lot about then trying to encourage employee ownership to solve problems, and then also trying to squeeze out defects and losses. Ferris, how did that work on the shop floor? Like, what was really the lived experience down in the factories and production lines themselves?
Yeah. First, Gary, I want to echo Lisa's point. She's totally right. It starts with leadership. The culture you want to create. We call it, IWS. But I want to step back before we go into the acronym. When we talk about fixed mindset, growth mindset, the fixed mindset in the old days, or still today in many industries or many companies or societies, is I know better than you. I'm the boss. I'm the leader. I'm the master in my field, and I tend to make most of the decision and decide on behalf of my team what's right, because I always say, I've done it before. It doesn't happen here. It doesn't work. That's fixed mindset. The growth mindset is I know, but probably many people around me probably know better. And often I do not know all the solution. Hence came the whole mindset of IWS, which is a 0 and 100. First, the 100, because when we talk about a culture that delivers, high performance, 100 means every employee is a VIP. And what I mean by VIP is valued, included, and performing at their peak. And that is the 100, is in every unit, in every factory, in every replenishment center we have. We look at every person owning a project, a solution to a problem, a Kaizen, as we call them. And then we reward and we elevate the colleagues who find defect. So finding defect, finding losses that we define that they do not add value to our consumers. When you put the 100 and the 0, 100% of our employees are engaged, owning an improvement. They thrive to find defect and losses to take them out of the system, being on quality, on safety, on cost, on service, you name it. Came to life our more than almost 3-decade journey on integrated work system, which has, of course, to it a lot of tools and capability. But I just want, if you allow me, Gary, to step back, to the earlier discussion about the pandemic, when I said, if you remember, I said, it was kind of a life drill. Now, I've been around for more than 3 decades in P&G. I learned IWS from being on the line. And it served us well. And Lisa, described it very well. Amazing partnership with EY for us to take it to the next level. But during the pandemic, the fact that all of us, the leaders of a region, the leaders of categories, the managers of unit had to stay home while our thousands and thousands of technicians from India to China to the US to Europe, you name it, were by themselves under what we call autonomous team. They understand the objective. Their primary objective at the beginning is make sure everyone is safe, ensure you enable and serve our business, consumer, and customer. And within that, support our communities. They were doing it by themselves. And that takes us to the ownership of the 100. And the 0 is focus on delivering the business. And really, our IWS culture came to life more so than ever during this pandemic. And of course, we see it in our result, and it's publicly available. We see it on the shelf where many suppliers, many competitors could not deliver to the tune we delivered in most markets, thanks to the colleagues we have on the shop floor, enabled by this 3-decade thinking of everybody's engaged, everybody valued, everybody's performing at their peak. And that's the heart of IWS.
Yeah, I don't think many of us would have thought a year ago that the minutia of supply chains would be headlines, and so many of these stories would be, our parents are asking us about how does the supply chain thing work? Obviously brought to the fore by the pandemic. So and then just give me just one tweet a piece. There's these examples on the screen of in India and in Georgia, how that actually applied, like what that really meant. Can you just give us just like 1 or 2 lines for each of these so people can just understand what that meant?
Listen, you have a team around a manufacturing unit, okay? And those teams, we call them autonomous team. They own their operation, they own to maintain their line, they own to improve the line, they have a set of targets, they have a set of skills. So we bring all of that through our journey, every side by side, on how we're gonna create teams that they drive their operation to deliver on what we call our OTSR metrics, which is in reality, serve the consumer, which is our service, ensure we improve our profitability, which is take all the non-added value costs from the system, and then ensure we manage our cash correctly through the right inventory, through the right agility, and so on. So on a typical manufacturing floor, every team has got their capability, their phase progression, the skill set, their defect list, and they don't need a manager to tell them, here's what we're gonna do today. They understand the business objective, they understand how they're gonna run their shift, they understand how they're gonna flow to work. For instance, during the pandemic, one of the things that we all faced, unfortunately, if you have one infection in a family, not on site, all our sites were safe. All our sites were, at the maximum highest standard of protocol to protect our colleagues. But if there is one family member for any of the colleagues who was infected during the pandemic, that colleague was asked to stay home for a certain period of time, quarantine, until he or she's tested negative. What does that mean? That means that we had, often 5, 10, 15, 20% absenteeism in the manufacturing facility. Now, still, our people were able to deliver on the day production, on the weekly commitment to our customer, and that's thanks to this multi-skilling, flow to work, the ability for them to make the decision for themselves.
No, you've mentioned several times, just how important skill set is and important training and preparation and so on. So I want to shift from mindset to skill set. And Lisa, I talk a lot about the needs of individuals, obviously, to have the right skill set, but organizations have a skill set too. How do you think about the skill set that was required to respond to the Great Reset?
Yeah. So most of us in our careers have seen supply chain disruptions because of weather, because of network or logistic disruptions, because of technology outages. And they tended to be sort of geographically targeted, and they'd last a few days or maybe even a few weeks. None of us had ever seen anything quite like this, where the breadth was global, the intensity moved around the world, and the duration, in many ways, is still ongoing until we can all get back to your phase of thrive. And so for the manufacturing industry, I think it really makes us look back a little bit at the last 30 years, because what many manufacturers have done is focused very much on building the skill sets of their organizations to be a very linear, highly repeatable, high volume, lowest possible cost model. And we've actually all gotten very good at it. And I think what we've seen through the pandemic is that those who maybe took a little different approach, those who were looking more at their supply chain as a network, those who were building an optimized model, and Farah said something very important, an optimized model that focused on delivering value to customers. I think those are the folks who actually came out of this better. And so if you think about what it takes to really survive and to thrive in this new normal, it really is about resiliency. And resiliency has a few aspects to it. And I think you build skill sets to actually be able to create a resilient a company or a resilient supply chain. And I just want to focus on a few here because I do think it starts with visibility. And I think a lot of us look at our tier one suppliers and think we have visibility into our supply chain. But what COVID has very clearly taught us is that we need to go down to tiers 3 and tiers 4 and understand the nature of our relationships and the risks that we face when we do that. And that's going to require us to have different kinds of relationships with our suppliers, those trusted, secured relationships. You know, when Biden's report, his 100-day report on supply chain came out a few months ago, one of the things it talked about was that we were going to need to, as manufacturing industry, focus on trusted ecosystems. And I think that starts with the suppliers we have today and the way we work with and relate to them. It means that we're going to have to develop new alternatives. We're going to have new network alternatives. We're going to have new alternatives of supply. We also are going to even need to look at our products a little bit differently and think about how we can create products that have alternative bills of material, alternative recipes, so that we can actually make and build things differently. And all of this is, of course, empowered by technology and leveraging digitization to make us better and to do simulations to help us evaluate our options and our choices and to move more quickly. And behind all of it, of course, is people. And so for us at EY, we call it people at center. It's very much aligned with the IWS philosophy. And the idea is that we drive continuous improvement and we drive continuous learning through our people. And I'll give you a quick example that comes from our EY P&G Alliance. We have a food manufacturer that we have helped implement IWS, and they are actually, I think, about halfway through their implementation. And their primary products were provided to food services, restaurants, hotels, things like that. When all of that came to a halt and grocery became huge, they had to shift. They had to shift what they were making, the sizes of lots, how they were packaging it, and their people needed some different skills and focus to do that. Because of their IWS implementation, they were able to take tools like center lines, tools like changeover checklists, and they were able to leverage those very quickly to shift their lines, to train their crews, and actually to meet the demand. And they too are thriving as a result of the skill sets provided by IWS.
So that's a great example of how even during a pandemic, you've got the ability to have people rapidly develop a new set of skills. But you also touched on some aspects of mindset, which is that we've got to have resiliency. We've got to have a new way of thinking about supply chains as networks or supply webs. And we've got to think of always having redundancy and continually thinking of ways to be able to make sure we've got alternatives, because we don't know. You know, today it's a pandemic. Tomorrow it's generalized artificial intelligence or fusion power. You know, something else. You know, that puts fractures into the supply chains. But you also hit on tool set a lot, and you've mentioned IWS multiple times. I don't think for those who may not be familiar with that, we've actually explained it. So I want to go to the third leg of the stool, tool set. Now, when I talk about tool set, it's actually a combination of techniques and technologies, right? So it's not just the tech that we throw at things. I've been in Silicon Valley for decades. But so I'm obviously a tech advocate, but it's also the techniques, it's the processes and steps that we go through to be able to solve problems. So you know, the tool set needs to be able to be this constantly shifting landscape of the kinds of different things we need, techniques and technologies, to be able to solve the problems of today and tomorrow. So I know Andrew talked about technologies supporting creativity and effectiveness in our work. Both of you have mentioned IWS. So Ferris, how does that work? Like, what is that tool set, and is that the way that P&G has been relying on these components to be able to solve these problems?
Yeah. Gary, Lisa, hit the point that all of us, everywhere, across all the industry, the word resiliency. And there is another word that we hear, read, and talk about every day, unprecedented. We keep using the word unprecedented disruption of the supply chain. What does it really mean externally?
Yeah, in the movie The Princess Bride, it was inconceivable. I don't think you know what that word really means. Unprecedented. I don't think we know what that really means.
Exactly. So, and I want to come back to the question on IWS, but I just want, because Lisa made a good point. When we talk about the disruption we're having in supply chain, it's all about the volatility and unknown that happen externally that impact internally, businesses being, can you manufacture? Can you have your raw packing material on time? Can you have your transportation available? Can you? Now, these are volatility that we are facing them across the globe. Now, if you have volatility outside and volatility inside, you are, into major crisis. Hence, you might not do, you will try always to see and predict the volatility outside. But what if you move the volatility inside into stability? And the volatility inside in some of the manufacturing, the old days, is that your machine break down often. You have often quality issues, safety issue. Hence, when I look at what did IWS do for us and continue to do, is create that standard to run more stable, to have our supply chain run to target with 0 to very little defect, to run at a high reliability. So the IWS, when we think about it as a tool set, it speaks about, the what we call pillars. These are sets in terms of you predict failure on your machines in your factory, you anticipate them, you do skill elevation for your technician, understanding more the technology, ensuring that your material run efficiently, ensure the quality is high. So that tool set from IWS that we have been working on for almost 3 decades right now, again, it's showing more and more in a volatile environment when your factories are running to target, when your factories are running with 0 to no defect, when your factories are running at a very high quality standard, when your people are safe, that tool set is ensuring you are delivering on what's needed externally, making your product available with the right quality, with the right cost, on time for the consumer and customer, managing your inventory correctly, and so on and so on. So this is a phenomenal journey we've been into, and over the last several years, partnering with EY to even bring it to the next level have been a true breakthrough for both of us.
No, that's marvelous. And it sounds like, you would have wanted to have that level of experience with the tool set to be able to adapt in a pandemic. Lisa, how do you think about how all these pieces sort of play together now? We've talked about mindset, skill set, and tool set. And just really briefly, I mean, you've got 20 years of experience in organizational transformation. All this needs to be integrated, right? You've got to help people to be able to continually develop this adaptive mindset. You've got to help them to continually develop new skills, and finally, the tool set needs to be continually migrated. So how do you, just briefly, how do you think about the need for that going forward?
So I think if you look at what we've talked about today, the first thing is I think this does start with a set of problem-solving capabilities and a learning organization that's built into the culture. And at EY, we call that innovation at scale. You then enable that with a set of proven processes and digital enablement that actually helps you to rapidly work through those problems, to think outside of the box, and to come up with actions that you may have never done before, but that you have confidence will be successful. That's what we call technology at speed. And you do it by having a workforce that is engaged, teaming, and high performing. And that we call people at center. And so I think the keys as we describe them when we work with our clients, and they're very much inherent in our relationship with P&G, is innovation at scale, technology at speed, and people at center.
No, that does seem to tie all the pieces together really well. And I think what I would encourage those who've been watching is to maybe step back a little bit. And we've talked a lot about mindset, skill set, and tool set, and in your own work to continually think about what is relevant. Like, how do you think about the ways that you can best approach the work that you need to do? And as we all are trying to continually get our arms around these extraordinary times, to be able to continually adapt your mindset, skill set, and your tool set to be able to solve the challenges for today and tomorrow. So I want to thank both of my guests, Lisa and Ferris. You've been awesome. I also want to thank Chris Gregory and Kim Goodwin for having Sherpa'd this session and making all the pieces come together. And Lisa, I know you've mentioned the Alliance a couple of times. I just want to make sure people understand what that is and how they can benefit from it.
For sure. So it was about 10 years ago that EY joined the journey with P&G, driving to a sustainable zero loss culture. And what we've done is we've actually worked together to codify the operational excellence principles of IWS with a digital suite of applications. And what we can provide to manufacturers is processes and methods and tools. We can also provide templates, we can provide analysis and algorithms, all in a group that we call Smart Factory Enablement. And I think you P&G alums would be very proud to know that outside of P&G, we together have actually implemented this in over 400 smart factories. And those folks really did thrive during the pandemic. And it all comes back to the operational excellence that's driven by P&G.
So, Lisa, Ferris, thank you so much for your perspective and insights. Those of you watching, any follow-ups, please contact Kim and Chris. And thank you so much for your time and attention. Looking forward to the rest of the event.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks very much. It was great.